Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. Now, despite Nicola Sturgeon's pleas that she did not politicise the pandemic, she was doing everything she could for the best of Scotland. It has emerged that she absolutely did 100% politicise the pandemic. She brought in measures that were not medically necessary. She did so simply to exercise authority, to show the world how she was in charge, how she was powerful. And with doing so, has probably caused a lot of damage, psychological and emotional damage in particular, on children. This is a woman who hasn't got children, so obviously hasn't got the first clue about children. And this is why I always say that national leaders ought to have children. That way they have a vested interest in the future. Sturgeon only has a vested interest in her own rise to power. But she's been caught out. Patrick Vallance, has it's been revealed, has said that there were certain things she did that were not medically necessary and that were done purely for political means to put her stamp of authority on things, and that it caused so much damage as to be counterproductive. Let's take a look at this, because I don't think anyone will be surprised. Here goes. So Nicola Sturgeon did politicise the pandemic, as Patrick Vallance highlights the school mask mandate. Now, for about a year, kids had to wear the mask. There was no medical reason for this. There was no reason other than Nicola Sturgeon wanted to feel important. Her megalomania overrid medical advice. And then children were wearing these masks. It was dehumanising them. You're not getting that human reaction from seeing a face. You're only seeing eyes, not a face. It's dehumanising children, and it was causing a lot of emotional and mental problems for no reason other than she is a horrible, self-indulgent, power-mad sociopath, for the want of a better word. The former First Minister wanted school children to wear masks despite no medical evidence of their benefits. This is according to the UK government's former chief medical advisor. And of course, the masks they were making them wear were useless. They weren't PPE masks. All the experts are saying that they did not do any good. What they did was harm. They did absolute harm. The psychological and emotional harm that these masks did by dehumanising children when they were meeting, taking away those visual clues about intent and meaning and the sort of things. Body language, if you will. You remove that body language, you create these automata almost, and it can undermine certain personality types. Sort of uncanny valley. It's that uncanny valley thing where it's human, but it's not quite human, and it can trigger. And that's what's happened. And then, of course, having done that in Scotland, it more or less bounced Boris Johnson in to do it in England. If Boris had balls, I mean, he's got enough bloody children, you'd think he'd have a pair. He'd have said, no, it's not necessary. If you want to do that in Scotland, that's up to you, but we're not doing it in England. And stood up to her and said, no, and actually, not only stood up to her, said, no, we're not doing it because it's not medically necessary. All the experts say it's not necessary. Why Sturgeon's doing this, nobody knows. We're at a loss. We can only think it's because she's trying to make herself look important. And you could have completely undercut her, made her look out to be what she is, a sociopathic megalomaniac. Anyway, the UK government's chief medical advisor during COVID believes Nicola Sturgeon did politicise the pandemic with at least one decision not based on medical evidence. Bombshell revelations in the diary of Sir Patrick Vallance says she believed the decision to force secondary school children in Scotland to wear masks was totally political. The former First Minister has faced accusations of using the pandemic to foment splits. They've put ferment. I think they meant foment. But anyway, splits between Scotland and the rest of the UK. Every opportunity. Everything that... If they say, oh, can we open a window? Say, well, in Scotland we keep it closed. She was like that. She wanted a split and a division at every single stage. Psychopathic. She did not care that thousands would die so long as she could get independence. And indeed, my personal belief, and I've got to carefully phrase it, it is my careful and considered belief that she deliberately arranged policy to maximise the deaths of the elderly in social care for political ends, and that's an opinion I hold. Can't say it's fact, it's an opinion. Got to clarify it, got to protect myself. The former First Minister has faced accusations of using the pandemic to foment splits between Scotland and the rest of the UK. The UK COVID inquiry has already seen evidence that her cabinet discussed relaunching an independence campaign while the country faced stringent lockdown rules, and Miss Sturgeon had free rein to address Scots on TV every day. And boy did she. She loved going up there, being Scotland's mammy and spanking the English. That was basically all she was trying to do. Did not care one iota for the health and safety of the people in Scotland, and certainly didn't care about the psychological and emotional needs of Scottish children. I think that there should be a class action against her for the damage done. I really do. And I think, take her to the cleaners, take everything. Take her house, take her other house, take her spare house in Portugal, take her camper van, the electric Jaguar, everything that she's bought, ever. Strip her for it, take everything, and leave her penniless and on the street. Then she can see the Scotland that she's created, but this time not looking down from high, but looking up from low. That would be ultimately the best, wouldn't it? Sir Patrick's claims will add further weight to the claims, although Miss Sturgeon herself has denied this. But of course she's going to deny it. But it is inexorably true. Extracts published by the UK-wide inquiry show an entry in August 2020 that states Scotland breaks ranks on face coverings and schools. And it was written the day after the 4 chief medical officers across the UK issued a very good statement, on the day before the risk to children that made no mention of face covering, reports the Telegraph. The statement said very few, if any, children or teenagers would suffer long-term harm from COVID just by going to school, and that any decision had to be set against a certainty of long-term harm to many children and young people from not attending school. Absolutely, send them to school, no face masks, no problem. I mean, they always said from day one that the face masks were pointless, but that Boris was bounced into it. Sir Patrick said England's Chief Medical Officer, Sir Chris Whitty, worked hard to get all the CMOs... Actually, just an aside here, the big problem he had, Boris, is that he allowed this to happen. He should have said, no, this is a national emergency, and run it out of Cobra. That way, there'd be no interference from local politicians with grievances. It would have been imposed and said, no, this is what's going to happen. We don't care. This isn't a devolved matter. This is national security. And he could have run it that way and run it as a national security issue. And none of this shit would have happened. And an old nippy wouldn't be sitting there going, look at me, look how important I am. Look at me making these decisions. Getting my face on the TV every day. That wouldn't have happened. And the masks would never have happened. Anyway, Sir Patrick said England's Chief Medical Officer, Sir Chris Whitty, worked hard to get all the CMOs aligned to a very good statement released the day before. 3 days later, Sir Patrick wrote that Matt Hancock knows that Scotland's decision was not based on medical advice. That's right, because the Scottish Chief Medical Officer was in the room when they all said, no need for masks. He knew. That was the agreement. She heard it, went, no, we want masks. We've got to be different. We've got to be different from England because independence. What about the harm it'll do children? Fuck the children. That was her attitude. That woman needs, as I say, she needs to face accountability for this. The things she's done. She's evil, what she's done. This isn't just a bad decision or poor policy. This was a deliberate decision aimed directly that harmed children. She knew in advance what she was doing. Anyway, 3 days later, he wrote about the Scotland decision was not based on medical advice. He says, as in, it was totally political. Hancock was the UK Health Secretary at the time, but Boris Johnson later performed a U-turn and implemented his own mask mandate for schools because lack of balls or something, I don't know. The diary extracts also reveal Sir Patrick's thoughts on the SNP government's zero COVID strategy, which was tried several places around the world, failed spectacularly around the world, and so was given up and was put into just basically a control and minimise rather than the zero. The support from Professor Devi Sridhar, a woman who doesn't really know what she's doing. She's, again, not qualified for the role. There's an awful lot of that in the SNP. They don't like experts who are qualified because the experts obviously tell them the things they don't want to hear. Anyway, Ms Sturgeon stated she believes Scotland could eliminate the virus by the summer of 2020. Again, believed, not an expert. You know, you're getting a hairdresser advise you on policy effectively, aren't you? Certainly, you did have access to people like Hugh Pennington, but they didn't ask Hugh Pennington. I mean, why would you ask a world-leading expert and the man who actually discovered SARS, of which COVID is there? Why would you ask his advice on something when you could get a dentist, say? Seems sensible to me. Is it because the dentist will give you what you want to hear? Buns for elephants, isn't it? He'll tell you, you'll tell him what you want him to say, and then you can say you're following medical advice. Hugh Pennington would not have done that. And that's why Hugh Pennington wasn't in charge. Anyway, he writes, it was effectively abandoned by September 2020, the zero COVID approach, by which point the Scottish Government was trying to manage numbers like we are, and any talk of elimination is long gone. He added, Devi Shuddart of Scotland seem to have forgotten their elimination strategy that England should follow, as students are locked in Glasgow University and cases soar. He went on to say the Scottish Government was clearly going their own way, despite professing wanting to do things together. And in February 21, he also said the Scottish Government was bragging about tougher measures and zero COVID, despite having a higher proportion of cases. In the final entry, in December 2021, he said all three devolved administrations get the same science and make different political policy choices. Politics. Coming up. So we look back and we remember all that bollocks and bullshit when she's standing on the stage every day, looking into the camera and lying through her teeth. Follow the science. We listen to the science. Oh, this is what the advice is. And it's all rubbish. If you're following the science, you wouldn't have had masks. Follow the science, my arse. It's follow the politicals. Yeah? Follow the politicals. Because if we can be different, then we'll get independence. And if we can manage to kill a few 100,000 old people who vote for, who vote for the union, hey, we'll be independent before long. Nippy is a disgusting, a human turd, really. It's a vertical human turd. She goes around like, she's important. Well, she's nothing. She's nobody. She's evil. She needs to be accountable. I personally want to see her jailed for the remainder of her life, but I also want to see her stripped of everything she owns. Houses gone, wealth gone, everything. Rest of her life in prison, penniless, poverty-stricken, and knowing the loathsomeness with which everybody in Scotland holds her for what she's done. There are people dead because of her decisions. There are children perhaps permanently damaged because of her decisions. They weren't based on the science. They weren't based on what experts were saying. Indeed, the experts were telling her not to do things that she was doing. Yet still she did them because gotta be different. I loathe that woman with every ounce of my being. I'm ashamed to be of the same species. Actually, I'm probably not. I don't think she's entirely human. I think there's something broken inside her. Whatever it is inside her head, it's broken, and she's not got the mind of a human being. She's got the mind of a feral, vindictive, evil animal. I'll stop. Thank you very much for watching. Do please hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, leave a like, leave a comment, please share the video. And until next time, stay safe, stay well, and I will speak to you later. Bye.